So there's one where I do a sort of Korean-inspired version of the aiming technique, actually, where I have an exaggerated cant of the bow. And you're probably wondering, how am I able to have a finger draw with this exaggerated cant, and how am I able to stabilize the aim and have it actually go directly at the target at that point? Well, for my last video, this is a follow-up to that. Simply the idea is that instead of having it oriented this way, I actually kind of turn it down, so that way the middle finger is actually kind of pressing on it in a way. And all I do is kind of curl my index finger just a little bit more than I normally would, but it's still on the distal portions. Have the cant of the bow, and in this way it eliminates that paradox. So just like on the left of the bow, where just simply turning the bow takes the arrow and makes it more straight with yourself, same thing goes on the right. So it's basically the same mechanics. I would look underneath the bow. I kind of start a little high, and then from here I'd be able to see the end of the arrow through my bow and be able to line up my shaft with my target. Still, I like to kind of look a little out to the right, so that way my vision is much more in line with my arrow. Again, I'm right through it. I'm actually trying to aim a little bit more upward because the center of my target is hollowed out, so it's actually starting to hit my damn fence. I don't like that at all. And as you can see, just like with everything, and this is just a problem, or not a problem, it's a thing when you shoot on the right of the bow, no matter what draw you use, is that you're always expanding the release, and therefore you're always doing some kind of release with your bow hand, otherwise hatra, which I keep bringing up all the time. But because it's such a natural thing to do, I kind of find the concept a little overrated, even if it is very vital to shooting on the right of the bow. But the thing is that it's not made for thumb draws per se. It's just the fact that thumb draws tend to be used on the right of the bow. But it's made for people who shoot on the right of the bow. You see people who do Slavic draw do a hatra all the time. Another way I like to do it is that I always am looking through the bow, basically on the other side, wherever the arrow is aiming. And that's generally how you should do it. But you aim while you draw. And as long as your release is expanding, like the Arab archer of 1500 said, is that the scapulae comes together. So in this case, you release here, and then you add that wrist movement, then it's a perfectly expanding release, and therefore it's a stable arrow. So it retains the power, and it also retains the stability because of what your bow hand ends up doing, no matter what. So in this case, as long as I look through the bow, it should be fine. I don't think that arrow is all that great. The fletchings are coming off of it. Again, I'm not really one for arts and crafts, so don't really fix that. It's probably a little bit of hubris on my part. I don't really care too much about the exact draw length if you're drawing toward the ear. In that case, I was kind of anchoring and canting in a way that we see kind of Manchu and Korean archery ends up doing, is that they draw back basically the full length. It's usually like 33 inches, something like that. I don't know too much about it. But the point is that they're anchoring the string of the chest. So that's what I was doing at that point, and I think canting it does get the arrow out of the way, so that way you have a much straighter kind of technique to be able to do it. That sometimes I draw to the neck, as in my basis of Roman reconstructed archery, particularly the 10th and 9th century. So what I end up doing is that it's completely straight, and as you can see here, it's completely in line with my person. And so you can see it's right to my neck, and I anchor at the lip. I take the string and I kind of kiss the string. I'm going to use a really dumb term for it, but it's apt. Have my right eye on the other side of the bow, and as long as you have that expansion, the bow will get out of the way. that arrow, I gotta discard that arrow to be honest. But see, 4-horse fletched, so even more stable. So a little bit of the actual construction of certain arrows does also affect this as well. Believe me, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm just seeing where I am. If I use the same exact technique on 2 different arrows, they might have different effects. So, see, that was really straight, and so my huncher there was kind of like a dip, but it goes to the outside. So it works with all manner of draws as long as it's on the outside of the bow, but I just so happen to be using these finger draws. In the same vein as a Mediterranean draw, but it was from France actually. I'll pick that up later. Specific source from 1515, I think it was. Anonymous author says that it's done that you pull the string with the proximal phalanx, so basically along here, and then the distal phalanx right here. Now, funny enough, doesn't say anything about what the middle finger is doing, but I'd say for stability's sake, it's probably kind of sort of pinching it in a way, so you could in some way, shape or form, just adjust how you do it. You could have it more so in the middle right here, or you could kind of curl that as well. Because I'm shooting on the right of the bow almost all the time, I like to use this draw because I see that when you're pinching the arrow in those directions, or at least you could minimize the amount of pinch right here if you just held it like this. The 2 fingers kind of go down like that. As you can see, where is the middle finger, especially when you curl it and start pulling it with with either the proximal or the distal phalanx, is that it's pressing on the arrow there. So I think the reason why the author doesn't mention anything about the middle finger is that it can be adjusted, so it's up to preference per se. Yeah, gotta get a new target. It's just hitting my fence, just going right through the target. One, just do it the way I usually do it. Oh. Number 2. Number 3, I do the French draw with either technique. Make of these what you will. Can't make it work, each their own. If you really think that this is a bad idea, then by all means, you don't have to do it. You don't have to agree with me, per se. But as far as I'm concerned, what I consider good archery, and the fact that I'm hitting my targets at least from this distance, so it's perfectly fine for a distance like this, is that I'm producing perfectly equivalent effects, perfectly adequate effects, should I say. And the arrows are traveling very stably, at least stable enough for them to work. Obviously, if you do it on the left of the bow, then you need to minimize the amount of movement. In fact, I'm still doing hachura on the left of the bow, and I'm still expanding, but what I end up doing is I end up trying to push it down, so my scapula come down rather than specifically together. So in the draw, the scapula come together, but when I release, it just goes down. Nonetheless, people who do shoot on the left of the bow and then try to shoot on the right of the bow are used to the mechanics of shooting on the left of the bow, which is not a lot of mechanics. It's not a lot of movement after the release, and therefore that's where they're finding their problems. As compared to when you shoot on the right of the bow, because there's that sort of need of having those extra mechanics to be able to stabilize your arrow for those reasons, then of course they're very understandably going to run into those issues and think that this is a bad way of doing anything. But because I come from the background of a European form of archery that has a lot of Asiatic influence, then it just makes perfect sense to me that I can use a 3-finger draw, regardless of what exact orientation it is, and add it with Asiatic techniques. So it came really natural to me. If you really think it's a bad idea, then it's understandable. You know, you're effective at your version of archery, and I'm not going to tell you to do it. I will ask you if you want to try, be my guest, be your guest, in fact, and it'll help you in the long run in your understanding of everything. But nonetheless, go ahead and try some of these out if you'd like. Again, not going to hold you to it. I'm not going to fault you for thinking that it's a bad idea, because just as historically, the reason why there are different versions of archery historically and nowadays is simply because people disagree with each other what is a superior or even better form of archery. But it's also all very contextual as well. So you're good at what you do. I'm good at what I do for my context, which is shooting maybe like 10 yards away. I don't have a lot of room to safely shoot because I'm in a neighborhood. I've had arrows go through my fence all the time. So yeah, that's very awkward to try to explain to my neighbors.